Hey guys, so recently I made a post where I talked about my struggles with seasonal depression and how that impacts my level of motivation. I'm still not really having that much motivation to complete the Gilmore video, not because I don't want to talk about it, but just more so because it's a lot of anxiety now that has formed around those videos because I feel this inner stress to make them as perfect as possible, and that's something that is only magnified during this time of year. So today I thought about doing something a little bit different in hopes that soon I'll be able to return to doing the Gilmore Girls videos, and hopefully this will help me get back in recording mode. I want to thank everybody for understanding and being so kind. I really appreciate all the nice messages. It really does help because I don't want to disappoint anybody, and that's a fear that I kind of live with. So anyways, let's not make things so sad and let's move into the topic of today's video. Kiera loves TV. Yes, I made a theme song so that I can talk about all my favorite shows. Oh yeah! And this is just your disclaimer that this is not me talking about any of the actors themselves, but more so their characters. Please do not attack me in the comments. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, even those who disagree with me. But let's keep it friendly. All right, let's get started with the show. These are movies that are not necessarily popular, I feel like. I don't actually know anybody who usually knows the movies that I'm talking about here. These are movies that I really just don't mind that they're not as great as the other movies, as far as production value or a big budget or whatever. I don't care about any of that. These are just movies that I just love a lot, but people consider them not really great movies. Let's talk about the first movie on this list. The first one here is called Double Daddy. It is a movie on Lifetime that centers around two girls that are pregnant by the same guy, and they're in high school, and the main character, one of the main characters is actually completely nuts. I think probably out of all the Lifetime movies I've seen, which is a lot, this is definitely one of the really good ones. For me, I found it really interesting. I generally think we all enjoy bad movies. There's some movies that aren't necessarily popular or whatever that some people just seem to enjoy. I think Twilight was originally supposed to be an indie type film, but eventually became this huge thing. There are some movies that are memorable for me despite the quality. Right at number 2, I have Wanderlust. I actually was supposed to do a whole video on Wanderlust, and I did end up doing it, and I think there are certain clips of that video still on my TikTok, but it was never able to be completely public because YouTube blocked it because I was experimenting and didn't know anything about adding scenes into videos, and yeah, it was just a complete disaster trying to get that uploaded. But I love Wanderlust. It stars Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd. I love a lot of Paul Rudd movies. I don't know what it is about his movies, I just always seem to love them. Wanderlust is a movie about a couple that moves into this tiny little apartment, but after some disagreements with the brother of the husband because he's a total jerk, they end up finding this place called Elysium, and it's all this free loving hippie stuff. I'm really into the hippie type stuff and the bohemianness of it, and I think it's really funny. I think there are a lot of good laughs, especially Jordan Peele. He's amazing in that movie. It plays a lot on the idea of if you had the opportunity to have no responsibilities, would you take it? How would you react to that? It definitely has some humor that's not for the general public. I think it's a lot of that grimy, if you like movies like The 40-Year-Old Virgin. As I go down this list, mind you, I'm not going based off of actual ratings. I'm going based off of me and my personal experience, movies I actually have heard of a lot or not heard of a lot. And these are movies that I generally did not really hear anything about. I found out about them through unconventional ways, not they had this promo that happened and it just was super promoted and everything like that. I don't know the actual ratings of any of these movies. Another one on this list that I feel people do not talk about enough is actually a horror movie, but it's Animal with Keke Palmer and Elizabeth Gillies. I love this movie. I literally watch it every single year around the Halloween season because it's just really good. I found it to be really, really good. It's one of those movies that plays on the idea of being hunted. It is about 4 friends. They're basically trying to avoid being unalived by this monster that's lived in the woods. And what's funny is at the end of this movie, spoiler alert though, so maybe skip this part if you actually want to go see it.
the ending is crazy to me because then it reveals that like there's so many more of the animals than what they thought. And I'm like, well, I guess like nobody's ever gonna come back there, but like why would they hint that there's so many more if they weren't gonna make an animal too? I think the reason that I like this movie is because it feels more private, like because I don't remember it getting a ton of promotion like that. Even though Keke Palmer has a song for this movie, I think it was used along with like the promotion and stuff like that, and it is really, really good. Generally just love this movie. It's definitely one of my favorites that I would come back to. The next one on my list is called Fuckers. It's a really interesting concept about like parents trying to prevent their kids from having these first time experiences. As a lover of This Is 40, this movie was honestly like really funny to me. The next one on this list is Object of My Affection. It is actually an older movie, so if a lot of people have not heard of this one, I can totally understand that, especially if you're in Gen Z. I'm actually not sure the real reason why, but I think maybe this movie didn't do as great because like the buildup is kind of slow. Again, this is just me guessing, and this is not even based off of my own preference. I know that like some people just really want things like really, really fast. A lot of people don't have an attention span, and the buildup of like their relationship and like the tension and things like that between Jennifer Aniston and Paul Rudd in this movie, which by the way, this is another Jen Aniston and Paul Rudd movie. How did I just realize that again? The buildup is really, really slow, and I think that maybe that's where people didn't gravitate towards it as much, but I don't mind that. I like a slow buildup in things, as you can probably tell by like the cadence of how I operate like each video. Like it is kind of like sometimes just a lot of like fooling around, or just kind of like things are not just lightning fast. Essentially, it's about a woman who's fallen for a man who is gay, and she has to like deal with that like whole thing, like, I can't have you because you don't even want to be like with me. And I get like in the 90s, this was such a question mark for people when it comes to like bisexuality and like all the questions of that conversation. Another movie that has made this list is Snow White and the Huntsman, but that's kind of a question mark for me because I'm like, it might have been popular because I know like around that time there was still a lot of talk about Kristen Stewart and like the hype around her was pretty good around then. So I mean, it might have actually not been like a movie that people didn't like, or I don't know. I have heard some people say they didn't like it though. Now I have heard people say that I can say, but like generally, was it a hated movie? I don't know, but I loved it, especially like the ending was really great for me, and I've seen it a bunch of times just also because I watch a lot of Kristen Stewart's movies. I love what they decided to turn it into and how like it has this sinister kind of feel to it as well. They took this classic and really just turned it into this mystifying story about a girl who's lost her mother. My favorite part is when she comes out of her slumber and then she says like, "Who will be my brother?" Like that's my favorite part of that. Another movie that makes this list is also very questionable because I don't know how the public viewed it, but I always have heard some mixed reviews about it. This Is the End is one of those movies I don't think people talk about enough. The celebrity cameos, the iconic lines, it really was just this great idea that almost seems like it was come up with two people who were completely stoned. It's so perfect. You see people like Rihanna and Emma Stone. Another movie that I really love, and I think the real reason I connected with this movie so much is because it is very inspiring as someone who wants to create and wants to have a full-time career just being a creator, whether that's writing or like anything where I get to make art or make something that impacts other people. This movie really hits home. It's called Walt Before Mickey. It's a movie that talks about Walt Disney and his success story, like coming from the ground up. Now I know the real story about Walt Disney is a little bit different, and this can be really tricky because this is why I don't really like to talk about real people on here, because I don't know the actual facts and I would hate to repeat stuff that actually isn't even true. So I'm not going to do that. When I'm talking about this movie, I want it to be very clear. I'm talking about like how the movie has actually been shown, not about the real facts. And seeing him come from really nothing and hit rock bottom over and over and over again before finally figuring out what it is that's going to make him do what he loves to do best full time. It's almost like in The Pursuit of Happiness, where like you keep watching this character hit rock bottom over and over and over again, and you're rooting for them. I mean, you really just want to see them win. And then when they finally do, it's just this moment of, oh my gosh, like I literally watched you crawl from the ground up. I love success stories. I love like watching people who started with nothing and found a way to make something out of that nothing. But out of the two movies, Pursuit of Happiness or Walt Before Mickey, I mean, obviously I could have talked about The Pursuit of Happiness, but this is about movies that aren't necessarily popular. Another one on this list is The Roommate. It's another horror movie and it stars Leighton Meester from Gossip Girl. In this movie, she is portraying a psychotic roommate that tries to unalive her roommate. she's the roommate. And as far as why this movie didn't do that well or isn't known as like one of the really good horror movies, because I see people online like talking trash about it all the time, I think maybe some of the dissatisfaction with this movie may be due to the ending of it, because it is a little bit disappointing. I found it disappointing because it felt like we left off with no real resolution. Like there was no real reasoning as to why the girl ended up turning out that way, why she was stalking her, why she was like obsessed with it. Like there was no real explanation as to why any of this was happening. It just started happening. The next movie we're going to talk about is called Labor Pains. Labor Pains is a movie starring Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan's character is about to get fired, and she ends up telling her boss that she's pregnant to try to save her job. So she then has to like undergo like all these different baby bump bellies and try to pretend that she's pregnant in order to keep her job. She ends up like meeting this guy and like totally falls in love and everything, and like she hasn't told him that the whole pregnancy thing is fake. I have no idea why this movie did not do well, honestly, like because I enjoyed it. I mean, it was one of those like movies where you just learn about like be your true self, like you are a star, be your most honest self. I love this movie. Would definitely watch it again. Another movie that I recommend is Thoroughbreds, and I don't know if it's because of the really slow build up to the unaliving, but this is definitely one of my favorites, especially because I think that one of the main characters, she's completely out of touch with her emotions, and it kind of explores the idea of like, is she a psychopath or is she traumatized by something and devoid of emotion? Like it's really interesting to me. These are also movies that I love, but I don't know if I can make a whole video on each one of them. But I hope you guys enjoyed this, and maybe I'll do a part 2 if this is something that actually interests you guys. What are some movies that you love that most people hate? I thought this would be a nice video to do just because I know like that can center around a lot of feelings that people have about themselves, like based off of how much other people like things, and I thought I would kind of try to make this to show like there's plenty of stuff that I like that people don't like. So just enjoy whatever it is that you like, and don't worry about other people's opinions because they don't matter and they're not going to change your life. That is something that I am learning and trying to teach myself every single day. So stay safe until next time.